I just think it's still full of surprises. It's easy to generalize and talk about dumpster fires and things, but like I get to hunt around and sniff and just follow my curiosity most every day. And I still find immense amount of creativity and individuals doing things that kind of defy a lot of those
The
assumptions
bad
about
narratives.
the big tech and not to dismiss
Sure.
what's to worry about there. I just think like being able to like even just tap into people around the world or just down the street or whatever that you might not interact with before and just engage in a conversation or you ask a question and they answer and like
But you're describing a little bit of a mindset and a skill set that you have developed over a lot of years of this to get to that place. And I think that arguably part of the challenge we face today is still the number of people who either don't have the skill set or the mindset to think in the internet in those terms.
Is the internet still full of surprises? And I mean surprises in a good way. It certainly can be surprising other ways. Well, we talk a lot about that in this interview. So, as I may have shared in the interview, I don't know, I had Alan Levine is a good friend. He lives nearby. He's got a great story. Wanted to have him on the show. Did a regular podcast episode with him, and the audio just was, for whatever reason, terrible. So that I tried to save it. AI couldn't save it. So Alan said, why don't we just, because Alan is like, he's got this, he's an old soul. He's got an old school vibe about him. He will tell you things about sort of the way things used to be, not pre-internet, but I don't know, pre-today. And he's got such a rich history of being involved in the early days of what it meant to create online and find people online. And so his entire career, even now as the director of community engagement at Open Education Global, still is able to take his curiosity and interest in finding the niche, finding something hidden and beautiful that exists. I've always appreciated about Alan. If you don't know Alan Levine, he has created some of the most really fascinating free tools and applications online. He's got some great stories about how he's connected with people. He and I have just a fascinating, I think, story of how we met online and how we've continued to connect online. And now, ironically, he lives, 20 minutes from my house. So it was just a delight. Always, Alan and I have tried to be pretty regular at having coffee together and so forth. So in the true spirit of having coffee together, we had coffee together. I don't know if the audio is quite as pristine as it might be, but it's pretty good. I think it's still worth listening. Why don't you grab a cup of coffee and listen to, or go for a walk, whatever you do whatever you want to do. But you know what, actually though, make sure you subscribe. I hardly ever ask people to do that, but apparently it's a good thing if people subscribe to it. So that doesn't mean you have to listen to every episode, but you'll get reminded when, hey, there's an episode. And I think this is one a good listen to if you're interested in kind of some of the ways to think about the internet and maybe a different way than we are today. I think you'll enjoy my episode. It was great to have a great lunch and a coffee and a recording with my good friend Alan Levine. So enjoy.
So this is a second for me. So the other live interview I did was actually with my dad, but it was in my office.
Yeah.
So this is my first on the road podcast. So we'll see how this goes. So we won't be looking here.
Yeah.
Like there's the camera. We won't look there. We'll look this way.
I'm not looking.
And I'm not so elaborate that I have like a 2-camera setup, which is really what you should do this on. So, but I thought, Alan, you'd be one that you'd be okay with just sort of seat of the pants, hack, whatever kind
Absolutely.
of thing.
How did that do?
Pretty well. I teed him up with a few good stories that I wanted. And I mean, trying to connect it back to his education.
Yeah.
So it was selfishly sort of more of an family archive video. So if people listen to it and didn't get any out of it, I don't care. But I don't care what most podcasts that people get. That's not very nice to say, but you know what I mean? I do this for me, and I love that other people find it valuable.
I gotta say, like, one of the things I treasure the most, getting some audio interviews with both my grandmother in the 90s and my mom in the 80s, hear them tell the old family story.
Yeah.
Because you count on that, right? Like they're always there to fill you in the gaps. And all of a sudden you're like, your head's at the top of the family tree. And it's like, wait a minute, who has all the
That's right.
stories? So,
That's right.
but just
Yeah.
having their voice.
Well, and as the older you get, of course, the more you're interested in these kinds of things too. Like,
We're not going to talk about getting old, are we?
no. So, but here's the question. I thought of this question last night, and I didn't prep you this one. So, there's very much in today's world a sentiment of the world gone terrible, everything is bad, everything's down, and even with the internet, right? The internet is people would suggest is worse today than it was. Maybe that's true, but even if that is true, I want you to tell me what's good about the internet in 2026, because this is a large part of your world is the internet. This is how you kind of built a bit of a life for yourself. So what's good about the internet in 2026?
It mostly works. You still, we used to talk about, remember you had to log on or the modem, but now you just flip open your devices, you're connected. That's like a technical level.
Yeah.
I just think it's still full of surprises. It's easy to generalize and talk about dumpster fires and things, but like I get to hunt around and sniff and just follow my curiosity most every day. And I still find immense amount of creativity and individuals doing things that kind of defy a lot of those assumptions
The bad
about
narratives.
the big tech, and not to dismiss
Sure.
what's to worry about there, but I just think like being able to like even just tap into people around the world or just down the street or whatever that you might not interact with before, and like just engage in a conversation, or you ask a question and they answer, and like.
But you're describing a little bit of a mindset and a skill set that you have developed over a lot of years of this to get to that place. And I think that arguably part of the challenge we face today is still the number of people who either don't have the skill set or the mindset to think in the internet in those terms. So if you're kind of pulling back from your own experience, but you were to teach, say you were to go into an elementary school or even a high school, and your goal was to get them to tap into what's good on the internet. Like, what are the things that you would teach them or tell them to do? Like, here's a way in which you can move past the bad stuff and find the gold that's still there.
Well, I don't know if I can teach about it, but I always wanted to figure out things. And it's been a while since I did workshops, and whatever they can do that's an activity where they can experience it themselves. I did this with like first graders. I did this thing that we did in DS 106, like the 4 icon story, and you had just kids drawing on paper and doing things like that. So I think the small little bits, but finding things where they can still kind of just use their curiosity. The internet's not like, it's so, I don't even know where to begin to say like where I would send them to do that. But I think obviously between you and I, we always understand like the power of story and understanding the ability to connect with people in another culture who live differently from you, but
think differently,
but the same. Like, so I like to know what people like, what did you eat for dinner? And like, what kind of pets do you have?
Yes. And this is when the advent of social media presented an opportunity to do that. And as much as that was seen as, wouldn't it be awesome if the worst thing people said about social media was like, oh, why are people asking what they had for dinner? Yeah, that was the worst thing now. But that was
a good time.
Because at that time, that was the knock on social media. It's superfluous. Nobody cares what you had for dinner. But you and I were the ones that says, well, actually, I kind of do care because it's not about it's about who they are as a human being that led to me then asking them, well, tell me about your dog and your red truck and your travels and all of that. That's where it starts. That's how any relationship starts, with something low stakes of seemingly no value. But like when you go like, oh, that's an entry point, right? Like that's an entry point that we don't have those anymore.
And I'm also thinking, like, as soon as you said social media, I just read a paper by Dana Boyd, who was, around so early on the internet with her research into the way youth engage there. And her paper was Whatever Happened to Social Media. And it's the way she framed it, and I'll try to summarize it, just using my brain, was that it went from a stage of like production and you created things, you wrote things, you push things out through imagery, to now a lot of it is consumption. It's like, it's the streams and it's, you click like buttons And so I think it's a different, and she called it parasocial media because, now it's somewhat, at the influence
Yeah.
of companies and corporations. Again, a total gross generalization, but I think the social media that you and I kind of started out with is really a different ballgame.
Right.
now.
Because the expectation was, oh, here's this new thing whereby, yes, anybody can make things, anybody can create. And in those very early phases of it, there was far less judgment, far less gamification or monetization about it. So it's just people doing stuff. And we were fortunate to enter at that phase and gained enough confidence that we've continued to do that. But I just think today, because of the structure of it, social media is more consuming. Like, I follow these people. I don't actually, or if I do engage, respond, it's in the pursuit of likes. It's in the pursuit of whatever. Like, it's not just because somebody decides. Like, I find it so, what's the word? Innocent and lovely when I find a person who has a blog, or they have an Instagram account that they don't really talk about that much, but they've just enjoyed crafting or sharing something. It's rare. It's just rare.
Yeah. Well, and that was always or they called like, in the old days, like passion interested communities or, and still like sometimes like, okay, I'm trying to figure out something on my old F-150 and there's all these discussion forums of other people around.
Yeah.
They're nuts about it. And like, It's these little microcultures that I think we forget about are still there. I just a side distraction. A year or two ago, we were at the antique store out in Davidson, and there was one of those old hand cranked phones, his antique phones. Both Corey and I said, "Oh, that'd be great to have. It just looks like old new retro." And I brought it home. The thing weighs a ton. We thought we'd hang it on a wall, and it's too heavy to hang on a wall. And when I opened it up, I kind of got inside. I couldn't figure out how to get this big, heavy. It's like some kind of big, heavy steel thing that powered it. I just couldn't figure out how to get it. And it sat in my basement for a long time. And then I found another way to open it and almost got it out. And except the crank I couldn't get because the crank went in the side and it was stuck in this big, heavy thing. And then I found online, there's like Facebook groups and all kinds of like people who are just devoted to those old hand cranked antique phones. There's people who make them work. But a couple posts said like, no, you can't. What you have to do is like, instead of turning it slowly, you crank, you jerk it really fast. It'll come unscrewed. And darn if that didn't work. So, talk about what's great about the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that you can still find
That's right.
those people who have like crazy interests that maybe aren't yours, but also they share their knowledge. I always think that aspect of, I think people love to be able to share and not to show off, but just to be able to help someone else out.
Because if you have knowledge of how to start an old crank machine, like, I want to tell somebody, but I don't know who, because there's nobody in my neighborhood that gives a crap about.
Right. Everybody thinks I'm nuts because I like
Alan from Moose Jaw. He seems to think this is a good thing. Anyway. All right. So I'm going to go a couple of things here. I want to, first of all, I want to set the stage, because if it weren't for the internet, we're not sitting here.
No.
Right.
No.
You're not living in Moose Jaw. There's a lot of things that, because of the internet, right? Again, I love the story of why, first of all, you were not eligible for this show until recently.
Yeah, apparently I didn't have the right paperwork.
You did not have the right paperwork. So tell me about
I didn't realize that was the criteria. I would have done it sooner.
100%. Well, and I've tried to put this sort of auto messaging through the dozens of emails I get a week about requesting to be on my show. I want a flow chart. Like, are you Canadian? No. Well, then you're not eligible. So you are Canadian though.
Yeah.
So how and why are you Canadian?
Well, I got my citizenship in November. I moved here in 2018. I fell in love with a local teacher named Corey Sass, and we kind of met through blogs and interactions here and there, and things just happened and blossomed. And in 2018, we got to meet each other and spend time together, and it was love.
Yes, it was love. Sure.
And so I moved here, kind of from Arizona, packed up the truck on a, and came here. So took about a year and a half to get my permanent residency, which I needed. And oh my God, everything they say about healthcare, it's true. I love the healthcare system here, but I love living here and in Canada. And I would have never expected. I drove through Moose Jaw in 2011.
That's right.
On a trip, and met with you and Alec and all
Yeah.
the other people on the road.
Was that BC before Corey?
Yeah.
That was before Corey.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's Alan doing his own thing. Or
Right.
so I had a chance to like not work for a year,
Yeah.
and I always wanted to see the country.
But I do feel like, because again, I had you do an online class that Corey was taking, and I
Yeah.
think that was prior to that. So that was the sort of
Like, I think it was that year I was in Iceland.
the 2008
I
or
did it
9.
remotely. It was
That's right.
2008.
That's right. So that's the first time she heard of you, and then
But yeah, and you used to, it was funny because Dean would ask me again, and you'd ask me to do
I still do that, by the way.
storytelling thing. It works. It
Yes.
works by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It works. So anyhow, so I had my permanent residency, and I always was saying like that I should, take care of the citizenship because it turned out to be not that much. Getting the residency was a little bit more work
Okay.
than the citizen
Right.
online, and quite amazing. It was done through Zoom. The swearing in ceremony with like 70 other people
Okay.
who were getting their citizenship at the same time. So, we're talking about like hybrid things
Yeah.
and doing stuff online. They ran that very well. But as of September, I got that. And then I got my passport. And now I can be on your
Yes.
podcast.
Well, welcome. So yeah, that gives us that story. The second thing I want to talk a little bit about is open education. That's who you work for. And so just in general, give people like what is open education and why is it important, and even like maybe what you do as to support that.
Yeah. So the organization's called Open Education Global. And so the idea is all kinds of people around the world, and mostly higher ed institutions who believe, it sounds like very simple, like, education is something everybody should have access to. And that includes creating materials that people can access without paying exorbitant fees, but just also the mindset of sharing, which is we get to do keynotes on sharing, and
Yeah.
do you remember that Flickr image that people always use as sharing? It was the two little hamsters with the carrot in its mouth. I was in the session and someone used that, and I laughed because like, I knew that. I love that. But so it's a membership organization, but it's kind of funny because most of the things you do are open to people, whether they're members or not. So it's kind of the things about organizations that have the ability to do membership. They get a few benefits, but for the large part, it's anybody who's interested in open education. And it started 2012 at MIT with their launch of OpenCourseWare, which was the 25th anniversary when their provost, Charles Vest, said, like, we're going to give away every single piece of educational material that we do here. And people thought they were nuts for doing that because it was like, this is good for the world. And that's not really what an MIT education is about. And here they are 25 years later. And the number of people you see who were able to do some self-directed learning from those materials, a lot of them end up going to MIT later as students. But that set the stage for the idea of an organization devoted to other organizations that believe the same.
So when I look around and at post-secondary just institutions because there's a lot, I feel like almost every institution has like a number of free courses. That seems to be a thing. So is that, you feel like that's kind of an offshoot of the open education movement, or just sort of an ethos that these organizations have adopted because they know it's the right thing to do? Or
yeah, it's part of it. Like there's a lot of talk now about connecting all the opens, because there's there's open education, but there's also open science, there's open data, there's open publishing.
Okay, yeah.
So there's a lot of opens that have mushroomed out of that. Open courses, that was a big thing in the mid 2000s with the MOOCs and all, and the idea of, you could, make courses that would be available to the world. And there's still a lot of places that do open courses. Sometimes it's a gateway to say,
Well, like I think Coursera would be an example of, like, they have lots of open courses, but they're
they're now kind of more of a business training outfit.
But there still are, like, they
Yeah.
start with, I think it's just like, you take this course and you might want to upgrade and take the next one, which is,
And outside, they're actually much more prevalent in Asia, in China, and in Taiwan.
well, that's what I was asking.
Japan.
Like, where in the world do you think open education is the most sort of prevalent and used?
It's everywhere. Like we have people who are active in like Indonesia and the Philippines, in Japan, a lot in Mexico. Tec de Monterrey is one of the biggest. UNAM, you were just down in Mexico City, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and they still offer their courses free and online because, university education in a lot of parts of the world is not really accessible.
Right.
And so there's a lot of parts of the world that still the government supports universities to do this, which is kind of evaporated here in North America, so that higher education is very affordable in parts of the world, but still there's barriers to access. And so we don't really promote any one thing. We just try to network all the people who are interested in that.
So there's always a bit of a sentiment. I mean, again, you said, what year did you say?
2012.
2012.
That's when our organization started.
Right. But, I'm thinking of David Wiley's and other people. Like, this was happening in theory or, conceptually long before that.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, like you said, people like you were advocating for wow, we have this medium where people could share all kinds of things, and educators love to share. And so there's a natural kind of transition. But there's always, anytime something's free, there's always but how good a quality could it be? Because it's free, right? So anytime you're offering something for free, you run the risk of people assuming. So how does open education work to ensure that courses, materials? Oh, by the way, if you're watching online, you're seeing a whole bunch of people walk past us.
Do the Moose Jaw Tunnel Tour.
Going on the Moose Jaw
It's really worth. You guys having fun?
tunnel tours.
It's
So it could be Al Capone.
They haven't gone
This
undergrad
is the Al Capone one, I
Yeah.
think, that goes
Yeah.
up here. Anyway, so how do you ensure that that the quality is there?
There's other things you look at. I mean, you don't just talk about the quality of the content. So there are things about, there's this thing called Wikipedia.
I've heard of it.
It's kind of been successful that in a place where, Encyclopedia Britannica, used to have a lock on that kind of knowledge. So the fact that many people can provide input is a way to sort of address some of the quality. Some of it is when you get publishers' content, it's coming from some central place far away. And so what if you're teaching, a course here in nursing, and you really have to make it locally or culturally relevant to the region you teach? So open content allows you to be able to take something that's written that might be generalized and make it more specific or appropriate for the students that that are right in front of you. So there's that flexibility. And also for teachers, there's a different, when I talk to what teachers that have gotten bitten by the bug, they're more invested in content that they've had a hand in. Not that they have to create everything, but that they've chosen or that they've somehow modified, or they took in and maybe they changed one thing. So I think that level of educators being part of their materials, not just taking it because it's commercial. And it's not to say commercial content is not high quality,
Right.
but and then there's the idea, all the projects of open pedagogy where students are involved. You have your students co-create and do all the research, and they build an open textbook on local history or something. And then, they have a stake and they contribute to future knowledge. And some of those projects are some of the most exciting ones as well.
The other thing that I want to talk a little bit about again, and probably the key thing that brought you and I together, is the whole idea of storytelling and digital storytelling. And I feel like this is been, on the one hand, story. That's everything, right? That's who we are as a people. That's the thing that will sustain us. I think in the age of AI, it should be elevated in terms of telling stories and really the human stories of it. But it does feel that even really, I might even say before the advent of generative AI in 2023, digital storytelling has lost a little bit of its, I don't know, luster. And maybe I'm just telling my own experience, but I just what do you think the state of digital storytelling is, and what do we do to kind of help remind people that it's still such a powerful medium?
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question. Where'd you come up with
I
that?
don't know, man.
Lots of thoughts. It's become less of a thing in itself to say you're going to go in and give people a digital storytelling experience. I might like to think personally, it's just become part of the way I approach everything I do, is kind of that idea of a story arc and a narrative and a hook go into it. But I think as well, for when you're looking for, if you're creating content or lessons or whatever, like, again, like, you want to interest people, like, you don't tell them like the general things. It's like, this else is relevant, to you in your life. It's what Mr. Witz, my calculus teacher, did with calculus. He would make it relevant to something that mattered in our classroom, at the same time teaching us the broad aspects. It's a good question. I've been like going back to a lot of things, and in that time period, and it seemed so relevant for helping people think about the way that they communicate, whether it's their content or their topic, but also tapping into, your own stories and how that, what motivates you. I'm sure, when you do podcasts, generally people end up telling stories somehow. When you ask them, your questions aren't always about like work in your content, where did you learn that? Or, what influenced you growing up? So I think those basic questions still are out there. Where it fits in now, it's hard to say. I mean, we teach creative writing, we teach narrative, we teach how to present, and, and you still like see people who are, consultants who say like, I'm a digital storyteller, or I'm a storyteller.
Sure.
We don't even say digital anymore.
Yeah, which is fair. I think like when I'm trying to analyze where we are today, it does feel like the storytellers of this world have leaned into video so hard. So whether it's YouTube or TikTok, like those formats are the ones where such a high volume percentage of people are living and consuming. Whereas I look back at your 50 ways to tell a story and those things, like you were really working to create a wide swath of ways to do this. Or maybe text was an option. Maybe images were a good way. Maybe it was just audio. Maybe it was, video. Like you had, I think one of the things that you did so well is show people like I go back to DS 106 and some of the things there that were kind of in these different categories. And so part of the idea was for people to experiment with different mediums, and eventually you'd find the thing that you would gravitate for. But it just feels like today things are just so centered on the video side of it that it's unfortunate that we don't see as many people who can just take like your 5-card story or like, so let me just there's my rambling, my monologue, but let me segue that back into your favorite digital storytelling tools that you've built over there, because you've built so many. And so whether this is one that you think has had staying power, because I still get messages when people use my images for 5-card story. Somebody's using them, but like, what are the ones that kind of think like, that was a really good one, and that seemed to resonate with people in terms of all the hundreds of things you've built over the years?
Oh, I got a lot of things I want to say. The one that like the 5-card story, I mean, that I'm first of all, I'm surprised that website still works. I look at
So
it,
explain to people how it
a
works.
couple months. Basically it came from, I don't know, the whole picture. There used to be and there still is, I think, a Flickr group called, it was basically tell a story in 5 photos, no captions. So it's like, what can you convey in a story just by the imagery, and let the imagery talk in 5 images. And that's hard to do. And then there was also this thing that a good colleague of mine, Ruben Pointadora, did that was based upon, I think it was an activity by Scott McCloud. And you take that old comic Nancy, which I never really liked. And it was a game you played on a card table. You take comic strips, you cut up all the panels, you separate them, you disengage them from the original content, and you mix them up in a hat. And then your turn is, you get 5 Nancy panels. You have to pick one that starts the story. My turn, I go back into the hat. I pick 5 out, and I pick 2. And you have to pick in order to make a story out of things that don't belong together. So I said to myself, Alan, I wonder if this, because I love Flickr, like, is there a way I can do this with using images that are tagged in Flickr? And that became 5-card Flickr stories. So more or less, you go to the site, you say, I want to play around. You get 5 images. You pick one for your first story. You pick another for your second story.
Each time you click, it'll give you a brand new file.
Yeah. You get another handed deal.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, and it's not easy. And then at the end, you get to write a little, if you want to write what the narration is, or what the the story is. And it's always been interesting because most of the time people go pretty literal. They use
Sure.
what's in the picture.
Yeah.
The real craft of storytelling is where you put things that aren't in the images,
Right.
or you find a way
Or
to
something.
connect them.
Yeah.
So that, I think that was like 20, I was in
So
mid
simple.
2000s.
Yeah.
But then someone came up with the idea and says, that's really neat, Alan, but what about that thing that they do at conferences where you do Pechacha, the
Presentation,
storytelling format, but there are also people at conferences who did this thing called, sometimes it's called PowerPoint karaoke.
Karaoke. Yeah.
And so you volunteer to do this talk, and I give you a slide deck that has like 10 random images, and they're on screen for like 10 minutes, and you have to like improvise a talk on the spot. And it's hilarious. So I kind of put them together, and I came up with a site called PechaFlickr. You go and you pick a tag, and the default tag is dog, but you can pick anything like jalopy or plane or leprechaun was one of the favorite ones. And really what happens is you get a random image, and then do it by yourself or maybe in front of a group. You have to sort of improvise a talk based on it. It worked really well when I was doing workshops where you would do it as a group, and you'd say, okay, we have 18 people here in the round, so I'm going to do 18 images up there for how long should we give everybody? 15 seconds, 20 seconds? They agree upon it. Okay, now give me a tag that you think is going to work. And the group comes up with a tag, and then more or less they have to take turns. And so again, you'd see people go very literally like, oh, well, there's a picture of a building with a marquee on it. But then occasionally you could see someone in the room would throw in something that wasn't in the picture. And the other was, as soon as the image changed, you had to stop. So if you stop mid-sentence, I'd have to pick it up.
Yeah.
And then the person who went last has the biggest role because they have to wrap it up. So that was always a good activity I found for doing as sort of like an intro session.
I've used that many times in sessions, and I always give you credit. And the part of it I love too is that like, it's one of these things, like it's such a community building tool because somebody will obviously screw up. And it's fine.
Yeah.
Like nobody cares. And and yet everybody's getting cheered on because you want them to be good.
Yeah.
And if they don't, it's fine. But if they do, it's like people will applaud. People will get really excited when somebody says, even if it's a clever word around, like they come up with like your second word is like something abstract, but still connects. And like, oh, I got the joke. Everybody gets the joke, whatever it is. Like it's a brilliant activity.
I'm honored you still use it. Actually, I kind of I let it.
I did forget about it, but I used it not too long ago. But I have something coming up, and that actually came to mind and says, "Oh, I'm gonna use that."
Well, I changed the website. I'm like, I had so many domain names that I was paying for.
Okay.
So I started shedding them. So PechaFlickr.net doesn't open. It went back to PechaFlickr.cogdogblog.com.
Okay.
It's still there. But the ironic thing is, like, first of all, I think I made that in 2011, and it still works, and because it's built off of not just Flickr, but Flickr has this techie thing, the API, which allowed me, I can do some coding. I'm not really a talented programmer. I just like look things up and figure out how to do things. But I was able to put this idea together and use someone else's code for talking to Flickr to get those images. So I kind of like, it's been a while since I built some web things, but that part about putting different little things together has always been part of what I love doing.
I think, I don't know how often you take inventory of the things you build, whether that's in the DS-106 stuff. And I think there's a simplicity and an accessibility to it all that I think is just like, we're just trying to get at the heart of like this idea of a storytelling. And a story could be a photograph. That's a story, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think that was part of what I think we're doing is sort of breaking the traditional, story. It doesn't always have to be in this very, yes, I think we still hold true to some beginning, middle, and end. There's some arc, those kind of elements of a story that's universal, no matter the medium, no matter what. But at the same time, like, I don't have much of a better compliment than when, yes. So that's far. But I mean, I like when somebody tells me I'm a good storyteller, it just feels good. Like, it's like, oh, okay, that's just kind of tradition. My dad was a good storyteller. And
Yeah.
I just think So as we think about the next question I just want to ask you is kind of in the realm of AI, and I've had some conversations about it, and I mean you're obviously somebody who uses technology every single day. You're well versed in it. You understand it. You use it. Like, what's your kind of as of where we are, May 2026? Your kind of thoughts on the state of AI today? What do you think about it?
I don't have anything deeply informed. I read a lot. I have to say I'm meh, and I don't discount the things. And, I've teased you a little bit about your AI writing machine and whatnot. And I know people who are doing astounding things on it. I just find like, that's not how I want to do things.
Yeah.
And, maybe I'm going to miss out. And what I wonder is like, the people who I see doing it really well, my friend Darcy Norman in Calgary, this guy I follow in the UK, Simon Willinson, like these guys have deep expertise built upon years of doing technical development. And they can go in there and they're able to like use the tools in a way where they can. I wonder, like, how are the future Darcy's and Simons, how are they going to learn a craft when really what we're doing is at the same time, the idea is like, I can do things that before weren't possible for me because I'm not a programmer. I'm not a technical person, and I can create, I can ideate, and I can see things come out that please me. Like, I'm really torn. And I think it's
Because the other thing, we have to be better at getting granular. Because when you say AI, that means
oh yeah.
a
And that's the worst
billion
thing to
things,
do,
right?
yeah.
Like when you talked about my writing machine, now we can have a conversation about
Yeah.
writing. Let's
Yeah.
talk about writing in AI. Like we can actually formulate some beliefs and thoughts. When you started bringing in coding and
Yeah.
data analysis, I was reading an article today that talked about how, I mean, AI has been used for quite a while, actually, when it comes to medical diagnosis. But this was specifically an AI diagnosis that identified pancreatic cancer 3 years earlier than the doctor. Like, who's going to tell me, oh, I don't know about that? Like, no one's going to argue that is a powerful benefit to humanity. So we have to get granular when we talk about like, what do you mean by it? And also specific about who, because the exact same activity in the hands of somebody who's an expert, like an expert coder, like a Darcy Norman or so forth, is very different than somebody who's trying to learn this skill. And even then, I don't know if they should or they shouldn't. In many cases, I don't know, but it does matter the specifics of it.
I may be making the biggest mistake in my career by not jumping in. But what I like to say is like, if it's so good that you don't need to like have these deep skills, like I can jump in anytime that I want. And I do use it. So one of the things I do is for some projects, I collect information that people fill out in forms and applications that's unstructured. And I use it often to help me synthesize and make conclusions of that, because I wouldn't sit there.
But but the thing is that you understand that if you were to do it manually, it would just take you a longer time.
Yeah.
And it might be disorganized. So you know what has to get done. You also just know that this is a highly inefficient way, and I don't take any particular joy in creating the structure.
I don't want to
be able to I want the data to be able to think about it. Right?
Yeah. And this is really like, I have a form where people, like, I ask where in the world they're located, what country, what city and country, and people put everything and anything in there. And what I want is, I use it to normalize that.
Sure.
To be like official name countries.
Right.
And the first time it did it, it was beautiful. The second time, the same prompt, it returned a list. It's like, wait a minute, those are cities, they're not country. So because I kind of knew what should come out, that's when I knew to go back and say like, no, you got to do that again. And so that's part of the iterative process that everybody goes through. For writing, I don't use it at all. But like, my writing mostly is limited to like blog posts and writing some short articles for OE Global. I'm not really having to sit down and do extensive like article writing or research writing. So I can't really criticize. And so some of the Gen AI tools for summarizing research papers, like, can't remember the one that's based on Semantic Scholar, but like, that helps you understand like a lot of sources that you might not be able to read so deeply. It gets very muddy. I guess in general, like sometimes I feel like it's not anything we chose. Like it came out on
Well,
us.
it's like
like a
somebody
wave.
said it invited itself to the party. And now it's
Exactly.
here. Now what do we do with it? right?
Exactly.
Like,
And it's like that crazy like uncle who,
Right.
can't get to stop singing.
well, and my point of it is like, you can like your crazy uncle or not like your
Yeah.
crazy uncle, but I don't think you can ignore your crazy uncle. 'cause it's
No.
here. So you got to figure out how you're going to handle your crazy uncle. This is a good. So AI, I never had this before. Yeah, AI is the crazy uncle.
The crazy thing. And then again, Dean, like I'm not in a position like a lot of people, colleagues I know, they work in institutions and they have to be able to answer the questions that faculty and administrators are coming to them. It's like, what do we do with this stuff?
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of luxury here to like
No,
pinnacle. So like I'm not into the for and against game. I haven't really felt like a compulsion
yeah.
to go full in. But like this morning, I'm testing a nomination form for our awards thing, and I want to put stuff in the field. So rather than creating like fake text or the Latin stuff we used to
Right.
always put in there, I get a chat GPT and says like, okay, my dog Felix is getting nominated for an award in his course in snow rolling. And it spits out this stuff. Like, it's beautiful. When you ask it the bullshit,
Sure.
that's when it's really fun. I just said bullshit, so you might have
I'm
to
not
delete
believing
that
it.
out.
I'm not believing out anything.
Like, you get into so much more problems when you have to figure out, whether it's fact or right or
Yeah.
wrong. But for storytelling in a way, you could ask it to create almost anything.
Well, this is, and the thing, again, I'm curious because I have my way of using it and it's my way of using it, but I love when somebody comes up with, oh, that's a kind of a brilliant
Yeah.
use of it that I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about before. So I'm on the fence, but I can tell you ways in which I think it's terrible. I think generally speaking, I think what's happening right now that people are highly attuned of is like people's AI spidey sense has improved a lot. So we can tell when the writing sounds AI, we can, not always, but we're better at it, right? We're more sensitive to when something is like, and I think again, in the end, we've just got to be clear when I need the humanity of it. It's the same thing when you make a call, right? You call a call center and there's times where I get it. You're an AI bot or whatever, and you'll get me the thing I want because I just want you to give me the phone number or tell me the thing I'm supposed to do here. But when I'm trying to explain something to you and I want you to feel just the slightest bit of empathy to the fact that my washing machine didn't work the way you promised, that's when I actually want a person, right? Like,
Dean, let me tell you a story
Right.
about your washing machine.
yeah. Well, I have one. Anyway. All right. We're going to kind of hit the home stretch here with 3 quick questions. So what are you reading today? And when I say reading, it could be a book, but it could be like a particular author or just something you've read recently that's just sort of ruminating in your own brain.
I have to admit, I have one of those piles of books, the bought books.
Yeah.
And I looked it up on Wikipedia. There's a Japanese name for it. When I think it's I'll get it wrong.
Yeah.
Look at
You buy books, but you don't read them.
with the intent to read, and then they just
Okay.
end up stacked on your nightstand. So it's sort of a goal to get through of
You got one that's stocked there, even if you haven't read it, that you're most tempted to read.
Well, I'm halfway through this one because we didn't get to talk about imagery because that's where I'm really most interested. And so when I see, I love Wes Fryer, but he publishes everything with those same graphics, and they're fine, but they all look the same style. And so, but I'm not going to criticize him, but there's something about those Gen AI graphics when someone just throws it into their writing, when there's really so much good visual material created by real people. So a big plug for better images of AI. It's like human art if you're looking for AI images. But I'm really interested in what it means for photography. Because photography is generally, you think it's pure. The photograph doesn't lie sort of thing, and that's wrong. And so there have been, Errol Morris wrote a book about it called, I can't remember now what it's called, but there's this book out now that I got by a longtime professional photographer, Fred Ritchie, who my good friend Jonathan Worth is a disciple of. And really, like, before even Gen AI, Ritchie was talking about when your camera there takes an image, like something like 80% of it is interpolated. It's computer generated, reading the information that's coming to you.
Adjusting.
The iPhone itself does improvements and things
Sure.
on it. So it's like less of like this image is an exact representation of what I saw. And so Richie has this book out. It's on what Gen AI means for photography. And he's actually not against it. And he's actually very proactive and presents some really interesting people doing like intensive artwork and like conceptual pieces with it. And it really just keeps calling this question is like, what is a photograph?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to us? And like, what's the impact? And I'm just on the chapter.
Well, and I love, sorry.
It's just that through history, there have been these images that have like changed things.
Yeah.
And he's suggesting that maybe the last one was this image of, it's really tragic of, and you think about like the Vietnam image of the girl that got burned by napalm.
Yeah.
At the time, there were like generals who questioned the authenticity of that. And there was a lot of argument about that. But those iconic images in some way influenced a lot of history change. And he was almost suggesting there was one from a couple of years ago with the emigration of the Syrian refugees of basically like it was a boy on a beach who had died in a boat. And like the amount of public care and attention that came from that iconic image. And now because any kind of photographic image can be generated, it's almost a question of like, can an image have that kind of impact?
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I'm really drawn to listening to experts in those fields because I'm not an expert in photography. I'm not an expert in musician. So I want to hear musicians talk about AI. I want to hear photographers talk about AI. But also I think about, often I share the story, and you probably know this well, of, the early days of photography. It was not considered an art. It was considered, it's just a mechanical thing. You're just pointing at your finger. You're not doing any real art. And of course, we've come to, realize like, no, that's not actually true. So interesting to see that with the evolution of
I just think, okay, however you create it, like I still like mucking around in Photoshop with my images. And if you do things and doesn't do something that pleases you, that makes you
right.
That says, this is what I wanted to create, but to do it like I can make it quickly just to throw it in there. I worry about that because it's like less investment.
Well, and I think the other, people talk about like the subtle examples, which again, this could be done before AI for sure. AI just makes it easier. But like, let's say you take the image of somebody's face and you change it from even slightly from being, really despondent and despair to maybe feeling differently. And if that is represented as some sort of an iconic image that's supposed to showcase somebody's, let's just say it's a woman, and now this woman who's maybe has lots of others to her story is being portrayed as being, oh, she seems really happy in this photo when she actually wasn't. You know what I mean? Like
that was a big story.
Wow, this completely changes the narrative. So anyway,
second last question.
Anything I know you're busy building flower beds and all kinds of things, but like, do you have any binge watch shows you like? I always like asking people.
Oh man. Well, first of all, Corey and I really like Landman.
Yes.
Oh my God. Those characters, I talk about storytelling, like some of them are terrible people and you still kind of like them. Billy Bob Thornton is
How
just
do you do that?
like that's so off the edge, but the writing and the dialogue on that show just like floors us, and we like can't wait. Gotten drawn more to the British crime shows, so we love Slow Horses. Can't wait for that one, and we got hooked into my colleague suggested Shetland, which takes place in Scotland, and
my wife is all over those. That's
we watched them all, and then sometimes you get to the end and you try watching something else, and it's like nah.
Yeah, can't binge that one. That's true.
And those are really good. It's something about the crime shows. We did all the Law and Orders, so
that's the thing. All right, last question. Hidden gem in Moose Jaw or Southern Saskatchewan. So a place that somebody should go see, go visit. Maybe it's a coffee shop like this, for maybe it's some other place. Like, what's your advice for a hidden gem for people to check out?
First of all, I'm a little bit, we've got coffee shops, but they all close early.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like have one you can go to and stay a little bit longer. And first of all, like we love the food of Aroba's family restaurant. It's just good
old school
home style food. Love going to, it's been a while since I've been out. We went to the Sandhills. amazing.
I have never been there.
You've never been there.
I gotta take those kids there.
Well, first of all,
My
like
kids.
when you drive, when you drive the roads, like the town signs that you read, and it's like you go through Leader on your way to success, and talk about that town that's down south.
Yes.
Saskatchewan town names
It's a whole thing.
are great.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah, and Moose Jaw. I mean, I love it here. Like here we are, we're on Main Street,
Yes.
and it's still an attraction. And we came into. I was thinking because I use one of my webinars. I had this thing called OER Under the Hood, and it's like it's the metaphor. Like it's a little bit problematic. People get caught up in car culture, but it's the idea about is a shiny thing that you built, but let's look at it and see how it was made. So I came down when they had the car show in town.
Yeah.
And again, you look at all those people who just love fixing, and like, I know nothing about.
Yeah. I don't either, but I
cars.
still find those, and they have like quite often on Saturdays, like you'll just see like, okay, there's a bunch of cars.
But when you just kind of stand back and see, like, there's a bunch of people, they love, that's their passion.
Yeah.
So that's how I want to see, like, people
Yeah.
feel about learning.
Sure. Exactly.
And I have to tell you a sad story. My truck Red Dog is dead.
Oh,
My F-150 that I drove around the country in 2011 and moved here and just could not be fixed.
Sad story, but listen, Alan, this was good. So just for people to know it, if you stuck with us at the end, this is our second time recording this. The first time we did it via Zoom and there was audio trouble, and even AI couldn't fix it. So
this was so much better, right?
I liked it. Yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
is better.
is
And
like
so we hope this audio
top
works.
shelf.
So
Yeah.
anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Dean.